Well, it's my distinct honor to introduce my former professor, my writing mentor, and my friend, Daniel Peña. I mean, there's so many anecdotes that I could tell, so I'm just going to kind of summarize and focus on one particular thing that really means a lot to me. I had the fortune of taking Daniel's class in 2017 at the University of Houston downtown. At this point in my life, I'd taken a prolonged break from college. You know, I was 1 year shy of finishing my degree, and life kind of got in the way. And I'd always planned on going back, but it was about a 5 or 6 year period where, you know, I kept kind of pushing it off and pushing it off. And getting back into the workshop was really intimidating after that long, you know, writing on my own, showing it maybe to one or two close friends, but that was it. In a way, I almost missed that time when writing was just, you know, this purely solitary activity. But there was a lot of fear going into the workshop experience. And, you know, in Professor Peña's workshop, I found an accepting environment that more than anything else, it emphasized the idea of dignity and the responsibility that we as writers have. Long before I read John Gardner's On Moral Writing, I already knew that writing was moral, that the best writing was moral, and deeply so. And so I've you know, carried that idea with me ever since as a reader, as both a reader and a writer. The best writing is moral, not in a kind of puritanical sense, not in a religious sense or society, but, you know, it's about dignity. And to illustrate this, when I worked at the Bayou Review, University of Houston downtown's literary magazine, we had the kind of novel, crazy idea to do a prison issue. I mean, this was rife with problems. Even when it came to editing, we'd have to, you know, get the edits to and from the prison by, you know, letters, you know, and it was a slow system. The state was very much against having this happen. You know, the prison system in Texas, really across the United States, but in Texas is specifically set up to limit this kind of dialogue. You know, if you're a member of the press, for example, a journalist, and you're trying to find out what life is behind bars, it's nearly impossible. By the time you actually get the credentials to go through, you know, you're really seeing theater. You're not seeing what that daily life is really like. So we circumvented that through the help of 90.1 KPFT. Professor Peña was an unflagging leader in this. I mean, this was, you know, potentially a messy situation. We were getting, you know, firsthand accounts of things happening behind bars, of corruption on the part of the guards, of, you know, people being railroaded. I mean, there was even names being named. And I remember at one point asking Professor Peña, saying, you know, maybe we should be careful about this. And he said, fuck it. We'll use their names. We'll use their prison ID numbers, and we're not going to candy coat it at all. And that's when I knew that, you know, this was the real deal. This was a man who took social justice as seriously as he took his art. And as I said, the best art goes hand in hand with social justice. So with that, I very, very gladly hand it over to my former professor, Daniel Peña. Oh, but quickly, let me give you a little bit last of an introduction. Sorry. For those few who don't know, Daniel Peña is a Pushcart Prize-winning writer and assistant professor in the Department of English at the University of Houston downtown. Formerly, he was based out of the UNAM in Mexico City, where he worked as a Fulbright-Garcia Robles Scholar, a graduate of Cornell University, and a former Picador Guest Professor in Leipzig, Germany. His writing has appeared in Ploughshares, the Rumpus, the Kenyon Review, NBC News, and Arcturus, among other venues. He's currently a regular contributor to The Guardian and the Ploughshares blog. His novel, Bang, is out now from Arte Publico Press. He lives in beautiful Houston, Texas. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Oh, man. That's like the best introduction anyone's ever given me, ever. For anything. I'm really, really touched by that. I'm always grateful when students like you come along, too, because I feel like, you know, you just find them and then you're, you know, it was really easy with you, man, and you're so talented. But thank you so much for that really beautiful introduction. And thanks so much, not only to you, but the whole Defunct crew for doing this. Like, stuff is bananas right now. You know, this stuff, we can't overstate enough. This stuff, like, actually matters, man. Like, the stuff that you guys are putting on, it creates a sense of normalcy. But also, like, the magazine itself is beautiful. The conversations are beautiful. I'm really honored to be here tonight. I'm going to read this piece. My agent, actually, my literary agent, had asked me to I have this behemoth novel, or not novel, nonfiction project that I've been trying to distill. And she had asked me to sort of write this in an essay form. And so I'm going to read that tonight. It's called Why the White Gaze Needs Brown Trauma, an essay in cardinal directions. So I'm going to sort of, this is my first time reading this. It's nonfiction. But if I slip up, bear with me. I should preamble this by saying, so the main guy in this is this guy. He's a buddy of mine, Diego Miguel Maria, who is this guy who was deported, one of the last people who was deported under Obama, real guy, and has been sort of like working over the years to try to reunite with his son. He's found himself this sort of like accidental stringer of sorts for a lot of journalists. Like a lot of times when the BBC or the Guardian, or like I know people who have used him to be like, hey, so what is the deportee community? Can you show us some fucked up shit? Can you show us like a car flipped over? Can you show us some narco stuff? Just like anything. And he's like, yeah, I got some fucked up shit. I'll show you guys some things. He'll take them around Mexico City, and incidentally has sort of like become this, has shaped the 21st century image of Mexico in this kind of weird way on accident. Like he just thinks of it as like quick money. But that thing that he shows the BBC journalists, that BBC journalist is like gonna show him. But anyway, he has a whole community of people who are sort of, allies of his. And unfortunately, this last year, someone within his community was killed. It was one of the big femicide cases in Mexico. And so it was this thing where what I thought I was writing, which was a story about a father and a son, accidentally became this like kind of international news story with this woman who was his friend. She was actually an American citizen in Mexico who was killed by this cartel member, and it was in a pretty brutal way. But it's a way, this is part of this essay that I've written, and it's sort of, I'll just get into it now. I guess to set this up, Diego has sort of like curated this image of Mexico, but he's been doing it through these like satanic tours. It's like, they're not based on anything. They're just like occult things. And so like I followed him taking a group of German tourists to this sort of like shrine of Santa Muerte, which is in Mercado Sonora, but it's not the one in Tepito, but the people who are too afraid to go to Tepito, he'll take them to this one. And so that's the sort of the gist of it. Anyway. It never occurred to Diego that even surrounded by people, Aliana might have felt alone. Her life seemed polished, eventful. At night, sometimes she'd come up on his Facebook feed with cool friends at a Snow Patrol concert, or hosting a mixture for Chicanos in Mexico City, or encouraging Condesa's American community to stop by Vivienne. Vivienne is her shop that she runs, to register to vote. There were pictures of her dog, Memphis, pictures of paintings she bought from artists she presumably knew, one from Cuban painter Jose Marrero, one from Oaxacan painter Rosendo P. Pinacho. She had pictures of olive rum and witch gin. What the fuck even were those? She seemed perpetually in the know, effortlessly cool, if slightly curated. But whose Facebook timeline wasn't curated? How did no one know the depths of her loneliness, she wondered? How was he blind to that loneliness in another that he was so familiar with in himself? Maybe it was impossible. Maybe it was pride. He took cold comfort in the fact that only her father really knew. At least that's what the news said. She told her father what she couldn't tell others, that she feared for her life. Her father told her neighbors after it had been too long, and one of the neighbors had a key. They knocked on the door. They kept knocking. They waited for a long time. They found her alone. I can't say when exactly the lights of Mercado Sonora began shining like neon, like the whites of the eyes that look at us as we pass by. Bovine stares, exhaustion stares, the occasional cutting look that falls like a warning or a jab onto our moving mass of flesh. This serpentine line of tourists with no brain and no body. We scatter and assemble, reassemble. We find each other again and again. I think more than anything, there's a certain curiosity that accompanies our presence. The way we always find each other, the sacrilege of this specific group, like many others that came before who think that they know what they want to see, but can't even imagine the gravity of the shrine, can't even recognize its historicity or context. The facts are outside the realms of their imaginations. This group who knows little to nothing about Santa Muerte, but ambles slowly, inefficiently, on their way to the shrine anyway for proof that they were there, proof that they came and saw and conquered, no matter if it's not the bigger shrine, the more famous one in Tepito, Mexico's oldest and largest black market. Online, who has to know? That one is too dangerous to get to anyway. No, this one is safe. You can say you were there. You can stand in front of the altar and smile and point to the space over your shoulder, the skull smile, and pretend like you need to pretend that you're from Vice or Atlas Obscura or whatever it is that you need to believe about yourself, the tourist, the voyeur. Anyway, it's there, and we move toward it, if only for the gram, the Instagram. Right? Daylight has long bled away from the fluorescent thrum in this part of the market. Long streets of light burst at the rooftops. The visual effects down low is a kind of digital chiaroscuro of LEDs and halogen bulbs, and the fluorescent glow too, with thin gray shadows cast over the edges of everything. There's a synthetic pop to every color, a gray liquid streak around every white and black corner. And in this way, in this light, we come upon the altar to Santa Muerte, which is where the Germans wanted to be all along. She appears to us as a spray of monochrome backlit by color. Offerings pile at her feet. She is a human skeleton, a real one, with real bones that belong to some real person who can say, dressed in a white robe. She has a black scythe in her right hand, a string of dollar and peso bills lassoed across her shoulders, a globe in her left hand. Next to her, a man in a pink shirt with a slack expression on his face collect bills for the upkeep of the altar. No photos allowed. Immediately, one of the Germans takes up her camera and shoots. She must be my age, late 20s, early 30s. She has a dark mass of curls tied into a messy bun at the top of her head. She's svelte. Her cheekbones are high, her eyes wide set. There's an intensity to them, like those Kathy Kollwitz cuts you see sometimes in Berlin or Leipzig, or sometimes, often, from the comfort of the other side of your iPhone screen. Those sketches that need distance, that spring the word moribund into your imagined ear. The German woman's face is from another era, another century. Sometimes you wonder if that's the connective tissue between Germans and Mexicans, that weird affinity each culture has for the other. Is it this familiarity with death, a friendliness with it almost? Where was it that you read that Germany was the marching grounds of Europe? Where was it that you read about the entire generation of Germans who simply stopped plowing the fields, stopped working altogether because there was no point in it all? Your German wife has already told you as much. Germans, by nature and historic circumstance, are naturally suspicious of the outsider, the French soldier, the Russian soldier, the American soldier, the tourist too. As far as the 20th century is concerned, they brought it on themselves, of course, or rather the Junker class of the Prussians, and then later the Nazis did. And if it's one thing the Germans have done well, it's recognizing the fact that they'll never live down the atrocities they committed in the 20th century. Part of the reasons why so many Germans I know, to their credit, look outside of themselves, outside of their country and lived experience in the 21st century, at once to atone for the past in looking outward more than inward, but also to shake off the inherited trauma of German suspicion of the outsider. The German, almost as penance, becomes the painfully obvious tourist, the unashamed tourist. It's a radical kind of gaze, I think. And maybe it's in sensing, despite or in spite of this gaze, that the guard to the shrine looks at the camera and instead of telling her to put it away, just smiles, poses even. Much to the horror of those paying homage to the altar, much to the horror of people like Diego, who, looking at the camera, might realize he could never get away with such a thing. Zenith, Nadir. This story ends with a death scene. I won't give you the death scene. It's too evil. It happened. The death scene made headlines internationally because it was a murder. Its news lasted 1.5 cycles, and then it went away. There was a Mexican journalist who pried expertly into the case, who kept the story alive, looking for truth or justice, but he was assigned another story. People got bored of the death scene, didn't want to read about it anymore. Innocent people were hurt. Innocent people continue to hurt, but the killing won't mean anything to you. What I mean to say is that you won't do anything about the killing. You will feel shortchanged, entitled to the death scene. You know these characters. You demand their death scene. The threat of death was the promise, the engine to this essay, the kinetic energy that propelled you to this point. But you don't just need the death scene. You need the details. You need for them to be spectacular, scandalous. It can't be just any death scene. You need for this death scene to make you feel something. What exactly? You're not entirely sure. It must tell you something about the depth of humanity, maybe. You heard that once in a literature class. And anyway, the death scene must rattle you from your numbness, charge you into action, make you feel like tweeting about the death scene. How many more death scenes like these do we need to take action? You might tweet. What does Mayor Pete think of the death scene in Mexico? Is there a 7-figure book deal to be had from the death scene? Definitely, you have to tweet about it. But first, you need more details to know your argument, to know what you can distill it into, to get it to one tweet and get the maximum exposure so you can move the needle by shouting into the void about the death scene. You'll think, I'm on the right side of things. I've exposed the systems that have contributed to the death scene. You'll check your likes, 2 likes, 3 if you tag the tweet to Mayor Pete, and you can forget about the girl who is dead for a minute. And that minute, you might try to remember Elizabeth Warren's Twitter handle. There are so many fake ones. Where's the one with the blue dot? Was it your turn to make risotto tonight? And what one person might like your tweet? That makes 4. Do you think Mayor Pete will like my tweet? Is it viral yet? It'd be viral by now if you had the more details of the death scene. You need the death scene to make you feel safe, like you need to stare at a car wreck to make sure that thing hasn't happened to you. You need the death scene to feel grateful, to hug your children closer, to feel better about America, to feel better about the fact that we've replaced America with a set of ideas, an idea you'd read somewhere in an exhibition once at the Mass MoCA, or was it the MoMA, or was it the Manil? Anyway, it's true. Like it's true that we need the death scene to replace the concept of our own obliteration. Like it's true that the obliteration is at the heart of American fear of terrorism. Like it's true that that's why we started the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq in the first place, to replace our obliteration with theirs, the body counts, always the body counts. That's what we were told anyway. We obliterate there so they don't obliterate here, fighting terrorism abroad so we don't have to fight it at home or something. Anyways, we were winning by that metric, the body count. And if terrorism is the obliteration of others, then what does that make deportation, ICE, Border Patrol? Why and how is it that we've so easily turned our fear of being obliterated into the mechanized obliteration of others? Undocumented Americans, or Mexican Americans, or American Mexicans. The body count is all that matters. The body count has become the metric by which we might measure America's slide into fascism, our capitulation to state-sponsored terror, in effect by becoming the enemy we were supposed to be fighting. And wasn't it Freire who said something along the lines of never reacting proportionate to the reactionary, lest you become them? A terrorist state we become then, at its most basic, a state that promotes and sponsors the terror of individuals, that obliterates Americans from the American fabric. You need the death scene to focus on the death scene and not the mosaic of death scenes, plural. No, you like your death scenes individualized, preferably not linked to Charlottesville or El Paso or anything having to do with white supremacist ideology that's infiltrated the state. You need the death scene to invoke something you can't really do anything about. Like those kids in cages. What are you gonna do? All you can do is tweet. And you need your death scene to feel like that. Exactly like those death scenes. Like that kid who died from pneumonia. What was her name? Or that other kid who died in her dad's shirt in the Rio Grande. Or all those people buried in New York who died from contracting COVID-19, the unclaimed. You need that death scene, but you don't want anything about the death scene. You don't want to do anything, rather, about the death scene. You need the death scene to bear witness to Brown trauma without succumbing to the actual danger of being there, to feel something, to avoid doing anything, and from the comfort of your own chair. You need the diffusion of responsibility. I will not give you the death scene, but here's a life scene. Here's Diego on his satanic tour, exculpating white people who need to buy their way out of guilt with shirts and tours and questions that are insensitive and absolutely fucking bananas. In the end, that's what he tells you he sells, exculpation. Exculpation, which can be monetized, which will reunite him with his son eventually. Here's me and Diego walking into the National Cathedral of Mexico in the Zocalo after the tour. Here's us blessing ourselves. Here's us, terrible Catholics, me with my Bacchity, genuflecting knee, Diego with his 666 tattoos. Here's us kneeling. Here's us asking just generally for forgiveness. Diego needs it. I need it. We pray for intercession for me, for him. At least that's what I'm thinking. And what is it, in fact, that he's thinking? In my mind's imagined eye, I can only see that altarcito that he's built for his son, that mohawk helmet he's wearing in the Walmart bike aisle, the uncanny smile and ponytail and two chongos like his daddy, that picture that isn't a picture on his altarcito, but is just a story of them both driving before their life changes forever, spirit playing in the dash, that beautiful deep green of Georgia in March. Everything was as it had been. And anyway, I watch him on the slide, pray for his son, for his business, for his life in the West, where the sun is setting now over the presidential palace, and the birds, those mourning doves, are falling and flying and falling again. They are loud, they keep moving, and they are everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. That was such a treat. Thank you.
Thank you, man.